There is a sound in the darkness before the village begins to move. It is the soft scrape of iron against iron, somewhere behind a closed door. Then the quiet crackle of a fire being coaxed back to life. A horse shifts its weight in the stable, the wooden floor answering with a dull creak. From farther away comes the brief cry of a rooster, swallowed almost immediately by the cold morning air. For a little while, nothing else happens. The houses remain dark. Their walls, built from pale stone and timber, are barely visible beneath the last hours of night. Roofs slope quietly toward the narrow lanes, wet with dew. A thin ribbon of smoke rises from one chimney, then another, disappearing into the grey sky before the sun has properly decided to appear. This is a village in northern France, sometime around the year 1880. It is not a famous place. No important battle will be fought here. No king will visit. No great invention will be unveiled in its square. The people sleeping behind these walls will never appear in history books. And yet, by morning, hundreds of small decisions will have been made here. A fire will need feeding, water will need carrying, bread will need cutting, animals will need attention, fields will need walking, children will need waking. 100 ordinary things will happen, and each one will reveal something about a world that has almost completely disappeared. Inside one of the houses, the darkness is warmer than the darkness outside. The room is small, and the air near the hearth still holds a little of yesterday's heat. A few pieces of wood have survived the night beneath a layer of ash. When a hand reaches into the hearth and moves the embers, a dull red glow appears between the grey pieces, followed by the faint smell of smoke. There is no switch to turn on. No electric light waits above the table. The first light of the day will have to come from the fire, from a candle, and eventually from the windows. A woman rises quietly so that the youngest child can remain asleep. Her name is Jeanne, and she is in her 30s. Her husband, Pierre, works with the land and keeps a few animals, as many families in the village do. Their children sleep nearby, wrapped in blankets that have been repaired more than once. Nothing in the room is new in the way we understand newness today. The wooden table has been worn smooth by years of hands. The bowls are simple. A coat hangs from a peg near the door. Boots stand beneath it, still carrying traces of yesterday's mud. Jeannie reaches for the kettle. Before breakfast can begin, the morning has already begun asking something of her. The water is not waiting inside the house. Outside, the lane is still dark. She lifts the wooden bucket and steps through the door. The cold arrives immediately. It touches her face and hands, and for a moment she pauses beneath the doorway. The village looks different at this hour. During the day, the lanes will be filled with movement, carts, voices, animals, and work. Now there are only shapes. A stone wall, a wooden fence, a cart resting beside a barn, a few bare branches moving gently in the wind. The ground is uneven beneath her shoes, and where yesterday's rain has softened the road, the mud holds the marks of wheels and hooves. There are no street lights to guide her. The village does not need them because the people who live here know the roads by memory. She walks toward the well. Her footsteps are quiet, but in the stillness they seem surprisingly loud. This is one of the first differences between their morning and ours. Water is not something they simply turn on. It is somewhere else, and someone has to go and bring it home. The bucket descends. For a moment, there is only the sound of rope moving over wood. Then the bucket reaches the water. Jean pulls it upward slowly. The weight increases with every inch. By the time she begins walking back, the bucket presses heavily against her hand. It is an ordinary object, almost too ordinary to notice, but it has shaped the rhythm of countless mornings. Water for drinking, water for cooking, water for washing, water for animals. One bucket becomes several, one journey becomes many. And suddenly, a simple morning task has become part of the architecture of the entire day. Back inside the house, the fire has begun to strengthen. Jean places the kettle above it. The first sounds of the household are beginning now. A child turns beneath a blanket. Someone coughs softly. Pierre wakes and sits up, listening for a moment to the village outside. He can hear more than he would have a few minutes earlier. A door opens somewhere down the lane. A horse stamps inside a stable. Someone calls to a dog. Then, from the village church, the bell sounds across the morning. One note, then another. The sound travels farther than any human voice could travel, moving over rooftops, gardens, fields, and sleeping houses. The church is not simply a building here. Its bell helps give shape to the day. People know the sound. They know what hour it suggests. They hear it from fields, from kitchens, from workshops, and from roads. Even those who do not stop to think about it are living within a world measured partly by bells, daylight, meals, work, and habit. There is a clock somewhere in the village, perhaps hanging in a public building or carried inside someone's home. But most mornings do not require anyone to stare at a precise number on a glowing screen. The sky itself is enough. The fire is enough. The bell is enough. And the body, trained by repetition, often knows what must be done next. Outside, the village is slowly becoming visible. The eastern sky has changed from black to a pale, uncertain grey. Smoke hangs low above the roofs. The damp smell of earth rises from the lanes. Somewhere nearby, hay has absorbed the night's moisture. From the stable comes the warm, unmistakable scent of animals. A rooster calls again, this time answered by another farther away. The village is waking, not all at once, but house by house. A man opens a barn door. A woman shakes out a cloth. A child is told to get up. A dog slips into the lane and disappears around a corner. There is no single moment when night ends. It simply retreats. Pierre steps outside. The air is colder than inside, and he pulls his coat closer. His boots sink slightly into the soft ground near the barn. The horse turns its head toward him, expecting the familiar routine. He reaches for the feed. There is nothing dramatic about the gesture. That is precisely why it matters. Animals are woven into the household in a way that modern life has largely separated from our homes. A horse's transport, labor, and expense. Cows provide milk. Chickens provide eggs. Pigs can become food for the winter. Their needs are not hobbies or occasional responsibilities. They are part of the family's economy and survival. Pierre checks the stable, clears what needs clearing, and prepares the animal for the day. Inside, Jean begins preparing the first food. Breakfast will not look like the abundant morning table many modern people imagine when they think of Europe. There may be bread, milk, porridge, perhaps a little cheese or something left from the previous day, depending on the season and the family's means. The bread is especially important. It is not merely something placed beside a meal. It represents grain, labor, weather, storage, milling, baking, and the work of many hands before it ever reaches the table. A loaf can quietly tell the story of an entire community, and this morning when Jean cuts it, she does not think about history. She is simply feeding her family. That is what makes this world so difficult to understand from a distance. The people living here do not know they are living in the 19th century. They do not wake each morning feeling that they are part of a historical period. To them, this is simply life. The stone beneath their feet is simply the floor. The bucket is simply the bucket. The candle is simply the candle. The road is simply the road. Only from the distance of another century do these ordinary things begin to look extraordinary. Outside, more doors are opening now. The village has crossed the invisible line between night and morning. A cart moves slowly along the lane, its wheels making a deep, uneven sound over the stones and mud. A child runs after a chicken. Someone laughs from inside a nearby house. A woman carries a basket toward another doorway. The church bell has gone quiet again, but the village no longer needs it to announce that the day has begun. Beyond the houses, the fields wait beneath a pale morning sky. They stretch outward in irregular patches, divided by paths, hedges, fences, and narrow strips of land. Beyond them are other villages, other farms, other roads leading gradually toward towns and markets that most people here will visit only when there is a reason. The modern world exists. Factories are already changing parts of Europe. Railways are shortening distances. Telegraphs are carrying messages faster than horses ever could. Gas and electric lighting are beginning to transform certain towns and cities. But here, in this small rural village, the old rhythm still holds remarkably strong. For a little longer, the day belongs to the fire, the fields, the animals, the road, and the people who know exactly what each morning requires. The children are awake now. The room is brighter. The kettle is warm. The first meal is nearly ready. Pierre comes back inside from the stable, bringing the smell of cold air and hay with him. Jean sets the bread on the table. A child rubs sleep from tired eyes, and beyond the doorway, the village has fully awakened. The quiet is gone. The day has begun. The first meal is simple, but it takes place inside a room that has already been working for hours. The fire has settled into a steady warmth now, and the cold that entered through the doorway has begun to retreat toward the walls. Jean places the bread on the table, cuts it carefully, and pours what milk has been set aside for the family. There may be porridge as well, depending on what was available and what the household had prepared. Nothing is wasted casually here. A crust has value. A little milk has value. A handful of grain has value. Pierre sits near the fire, warming his hands for a moment before eating. The children are quieter than they will be later. Outside, the village is becoming louder. Hooves strike the road. A cart passes. Someone calls across a courtyard. Chickens scatter beneath a fence, and from a nearby house comes the dull rhythm of chopping wood. There is no rush in the modern sense, but there is urgency. The difference is important. The family does not have an endless morning in which to prepare themselves. Work is waiting, and daylight is already moving across the fields. The fire needs tending. Animals need feeding. Clothes need putting on. Water needs carrying. The house needs preparing for another day. Breakfast is therefore not simply a pause before life begins. It is part of the work of beginning life. Jean tears a piece of bread and gives it to the youngest child. Pierre drinks slowly, then looks toward the window. The sky has brightened. Soon they will leave the warmth of the room behind. For the children, the morning contains its own smaller responsibilities. One may carry a small object from the table. Another may help with the animals. An older child might be expected to fetch something, sweep a floor, gather eggs, or assist with work that adults cannot spare the time to do themselves. Childhood exists here, but it does not occupy the same shape it does in a modern household. There is play. There is curiosity. There are friendships and games. But there is also work woven through the day so naturally that the boundary between helping and simply living is difficult to separate. A child learns by watching, then by copying, then by doing, and eventually, without any formal ceremony, the thing once watched becomes something the child knows how to do. The same is true of almost everything in the household. Jean does not need a manual to prepare the morning fire. Pierre does not need written instructions to care for the horse. The children do not need a lesson explaining that water is heavy. Their bodies learn. Their hands learn. Their habits learn. This is one of the quiet secrets of ordinary life in the 19th century. Knowledge is often stored not in books, but in repetition. A wooden spoon may have been used thousands of times by different hands. A particular way of stacking firewood may have been learned from a parent. A recipe may exist only in memory. A method of repairing a tool may be known by one craftsman and passed to another through watching. The village is full of knowledge that has no label. After breakfast, Jean begins clearing the table. The work seems small until there is no running water to make it easy. The dishes have to be gathered, carried, and washed with water that has already been brought into the house. The same water cannot simply disappear down a drain and be replaced instantly. It has to be used thoughtfully. A little water becomes many tasks. The morning is full of such calculations. How much wood? How much flour? How much milk? How much water? How much food can be used today while leaving enough for tomorrow? The household economy is constantly present, even when nobody speaks about money. For families with little land or uncertain income, a poor harvest is not an abstract economic problem. It can affect the thickness of bread, the amount of meat on the table, the condition of clothing, and the ability to survive the coming winter. And yet, in this particular morning, the family is not thinking about the entire future. They are thinking about what needs to happen next. Jean takes a cloth and begins wiping the table. The youngest child watches. A few minutes later, the child reaches for the cloth. It is a tiny imitation. It is also how domestic knowledge moves from one generation to another. Outside, Pierre is preparing to leave for the day's work. Before he goes, he checks the animals again. The horse is important enough that neglecting it would be foolish. A healthy horse can pull a cart, carry loads, and save human strength. An injured or sick horse can become a serious financial problem. He runs a hand along its side and checks its legs. The animal breathes heavily in the cool stable. For a moment, there is almost complete quiet except for the sound of hay being chewed. Then, somewhere outside, metal strikes metal. A blacksmith has begun his day. The sound travels down the lane in slow, regular blows. Hammer, anvil, hammer, anvil. The rhythm becomes part of the village's morning soundscape. The blacksmith's workshop is one of those places where several parts of village life meet. Horses need shoes. Tools break. Hinges wear. Iron objects need repairing. A simple piece of metal may pass through the hands of a craftsman and return to the customer with another month or another year of useful life. The workshop is warm for a different reason. The forge throws heat into the room, and the smell of coal and hot metal hangs in the air. But we will come to that later. For now, the morning is moving outward, People are leaving their houses. A man carries a hoe over his shoulder. Another lifts a wooden tool from beside a barn. A woman steps into the lane with a basket. Two neighbors exchange a few words before continuing in opposite directions. Nobody needs to announce where they are going. People know one another's routines. That does not mean everyone is close. A village is not one large family. There are differences in wealth, occupation, reputation, land, education, and social position. Some families own more animals. Some have more land. Some depend on wages. Some possess trades that make them valuable to everyone else. But because the community is small, lives overlap. A wedding is not private in the modern sense. A death is not private. A successful harvest is noticed. A failed one is noticed. A new child is noticed. A quarrel can become known surprisingly quickly. News travels by voice, and voice travels at walking speed. This morning, nobody needs to send a message across the village because the person they need to speak to may simply appear on the same road. For longer distances, things are different. A letter can travel where a person cannot, but even a letter requires time, paper, ink, someone who can write, and a system capable of carrying it. That means communication has a physical presence. Words have to travel through the world. The idea that a message could cross a continent almost instantly would feel extraordinary. But there is no reason for the family to think about such things this morning. They have work. John changes her apron and prepares the house for the hours ahead. The room is warmer now, but the floor remains cold. The difference between warmth and cold is sharply felt in a house like this. Near the hearth, a person can become comfortable. Move a few steps away and the temperature changes. There is no central system quietly maintaining the same warmth throughout every room. Heat belongs to the fire, and the fire belongs to whoever feeds it. This makes the hearth more than a place for cooking. It is the center of domestic life. Food begins there. Warmth begins there. Light can begin there. People gather there. A dying fire can change the feeling of an entire house. The children know this without needing to understand it intellectually. They stay near the warmest part of the room. Jean knows it too. Before she leaves, she makes sure there is enough fuel to keep the fire alive. Then she steps outside. The morning has changed completely. Sunlight has reached the upper parts of the houses, though the lanes remain partly shaded. Moisture still clings to the grass. The air smells of earth and smoke. At the edge of the village, a field begins to glow under the rising light. Pierre is already there. He walks slowly beside the horse, guiding it toward the work that waits. The soil is not simply scenery. It is the reason the village exists where it does. Every meal has some relationship to it. Bread begins in soil. Milk begins with animals that need feed. Vegetables depend on gardens. Fruit depends on trees and seasons. Even the clothing people wear may connect back to agriculture through wool, flax, leather, or other materials. The village is therefore not separate from the land. It is built around it, and the seasons determine how hard that relationship becomes. In spring, there is planting. In summer, long days of work. In autumn, harvest and preparation. In winter, fewer daylight hours, and a greater dependence on what has already been stored. The calendar is not merely a sequence of months. It is a sequence of tasks. This morning belongs to one point within that larger rhythm, though the people living it do not need to name the system. They simply know what time of year it is by what their hands are doing. Back in the house, the children have begun to move around more freely. The youngest is still distracted by ordinary things: a piece of straw, a wooden spoon, a small animal outside, a sound from the lane. There is no need for manufactured entertainment to fill every empty moment. Boredom exists, certainly, so does imagination. A stick can become a horse. A pile of stones can become a game. A patch of dirt can become a miniature world. The absence of modern entertainment does not mean children sit quietly waiting for the future. They invent things. They watch adults. They follow animals. They wander within the boundaries their parents allow. And sometimes they simply stand outside and listen. There is plenty to hear. The blacksmith is still working. The horse carts continue along the road. A dog barks. A saw begins its slow back and forth rhythm somewhere nearby. A woman calls a child's name. Then the church bell sounds again. The village is fully awake now. The morning has reached its busiest point, and there is one ordinary task still waiting in many homes, a task so familiar to the people here that it barely deserves a thought, yet one that would surprise anyone accustomed to modern convenience. Laundry. Clothing does not simply disappear into a machine. It must be gathered. Water must be obtained. Soap must be prepared or purchased. Clothes must be scrubbed, rinsed, wrung, carried, and dried. For a household with several people, this can become a considerable physical undertaking. The weight of wet fabric is not theoretical. Someone has to lift it. Someone has to carry it. Someone has to work with it. Jean will deal with some of this later. For now, she hangs a cloth near the house and turns toward the lane. A neighbor is approaching. They exchange a few words, perhaps something about the weather, perhaps something about a child, perhaps a reminder about a delivery or a task. It is not important enough to preserve in any historical record. And that is precisely the point. History is filled with documents describing rulers, wars, laws, inventions, and great movements. But the vast majority of human life consists of conversations that left no record at all. A sentence spoken beside a doorway, a joke exchanged while carrying water, a complaint about rain, a quiet question between husband and wife, a child asking where something came from. These moments disappear almost completely, yet they were the texture of life. The morning continues. Pierre pauses in the field and looks back toward the village. From here, the houses appear small. Smoke rises from several chimneys. The church tower stands above them. Beyond the roofs, the fields stretch toward the horizon. For someone living here, this is not a picturesque view. It is home. The road is familiar. The church is familiar. The hill is familiar. The same buildings have been seen in different weather, under different skies, across different seasons. And somewhere inside one of those houses, breakfast has been cleared away, the fire is still burning, and the ordinary work of the day is continuing. The sun is now high enough to touch the fields. The morning is past its quietest point. The village has become a system of movement, people walking, animals working, tools striking, doors opening, food being prepared, and hands repeating tasks learned long before anyone thought to call them traditions. And soon the lanes will become busier still. The workshop doors will open fully. The fields will fill. The road will carry carts toward the market, and the sounds of work will begin to overlap until the entire village seems to be breathing through them. The peaceful morning is over. The village is at work. By the time the morning sun has cleared the roofs, the village has lost the quietness it carried before dawn. The lanes are no longer empty. Wheels pass over the uneven road, leaving fresh tracks in yesterday's mud. A horse pulls a small cart toward the edge of the village, its breath still visible in the cooler air. From the blacksmith's workshop comes the steady rhythm of hammer against iron, while somewhere behind a stone wall a saw moves through timber with a long, patient rasp. The fields are filling too. Pierre has been working for some time. There is nothing especially dramatic about the work. That is what makes it so difficult to imagine from the modern world. The hours are long because the tasks themselves cannot simply be made to disappear. Soil has to be turned. Animals have to be guided. Fences have to be checked. Tools have to be repaired. Crops have to be watched. The land does not respond to convenience. It responds to weather. And weather is never entirely under anyone's control. Pierre stops for a moment and rests his hands against the wooden handle of his tool. His back is already warm from work. The morning chill has disappeared from his coat. Across the field, another farmer is doing much the same thing. They exchange a brief greeting. Then both return to work. The silence between them is not awkward. There is no need to fill every moment with conversation. The rhythm of agricultural work has its own language. Wood against soil, boot against earth, horse against harness, breath against cold air. The village is working, and nearly everything people do can be traced back to something practical. The carpenter's workshop is open now. Inside, the air smells of fresh cut wood. Shavings cover the floor in pale curls. A workbench stands near the wall, marked by years of cutting, measuring, and repair. The carpenter is not making furniture simply because furniture is beautiful. He may be repairing a chair, building a door, making a handle, preparing boards for a roof, creating something that another household cannot easily produce for itself. In a world with fewer disposable goods, repair matters enormously. An object that can be repaired is an object worth keeping. A broken handle is not automatically rubbish. A damaged chair is not automatically replaced. A wooden box may serve one family for years and then find another use when its original purpose is finished. The material world is smaller, but each object can carry more importance. Near the center of the village, the blacksmith is working. The forge burns brightly enough to make the workshop seem like another season altogether. He takes a piece of iron from the fire. It glows. For a moment, the metal is almost impossible to look at directly. Then the hammer falls. The sound is sharp enough to travel beyond the walls. Again. The blacksmith's work is physical, skilled, and dependent on timing. The iron has to be hot enough to shape, but not carelessly handled. His hands know the process through years of repetition. He is doing something that would appear almost magical to a child watching from the doorway. A hard piece of metal enters the fire. It emerges glowing. Then, under the hammer, it becomes something else. A nail, a hinge, a tool, a horseshoe. The child standing nearby may not understand metallurgy, but the child understands transformation, and this is one of the things that makes village life so full of quiet lessons. Work is visible. The making of things happens in front of people. A person can watch a loaf being baked, a horse being shod, a tree becoming boards, wool becoming thread, and thread becoming cloth. The distance between raw material and finished object is often short enough to see. Modern life has stretched that distance almost beyond imagination. A person today may hold a shirt without knowing where its fibers were produced, where the fabric was woven, or how many machines and workers were involved in its journey. Here, the story is closer. The wool comes from animals. The flax comes from fields. The leather comes from hides. The wood comes from nearby forests or managed land. The grain comes from fields. The village does not produce everything it needs, but much more of daily life remains connected to visible sources. The road is busy now. A cart loaded with sacks passes slowly between the houses. The driver knows the road well enough to avoid the deepest ruts. A woman steps aside. A child watches the cart disappear toward the larger road beyond the village. That larger road matters. It connects the village to places that are not part of everyday life. Markets, towns, other villages. Perhaps a railway station farther away. By the 1880s, the railway is already changing Europe dramatically. Distances that once required long journeys by horse or on foot can be crossed much faster in places connected to the network. But the railway does not erase distance everywhere. A rural family may still experience travel as something that requires planning. A trip costs time. A horse costs money. A cart requires maintenance. Road conditions matter. Weather matters. The body matters. The village remains local even while the wider world is becoming faster. At a small shop, a few people have gathered. It is not a modern supermarket. The selection is limited, and many of the things people need may be bought in small quantities. Some goods come from outside the village. Others may be produced locally. Money changes hands, but so does credit, so do favors, so does trust. In a small community, reputation has practical value. A person who is known to be reliable may be treated differently from someone who has repeatedly failed to pay or keep a promise. People know one another's circumstances. They know who has land, who needs work, who is recently married, who has a sick relative, who has lost a harvest, who has a horse that keeps going lame. There is privacy, but there is also very little anonymity. The village knows. That can be comforting. It can also be uncomfortable. A mistake made in private can become public knowledge surprisingly quickly. But this morning, most people have more immediate concerns. At the bakery, bread is being handled. The heat inside is intense compared with the cool road outside. The baker's work began earlier because bread cannot be rushed simply because the customer arrives late. Dough has its own timing. Fire has its own timing. The oven has its own timing. This is another quiet difference between the old world and the modern one. Much of life is organized around processes that cannot be hurried without changing the result. Bread needs time. Wood needs time to dry. Crops need seasons. Animals grow at their own pace. Letters need days. Travel needs hours. The world contains more waiting. And because people cannot eliminate the waiting, they become accustomed to it. A child sits near the bakery door, watching. The smell is powerful. Warm flour. Smoke, crust. The child looks toward the street when another loaf comes out. For a moment, the entire village seems to revolve around that smell. Food has a way of doing this. And in a society where food requires more effort to produce, prepare, preserve, and transport, its presence can feel especially important. Back in Jeannie's house, the morning work continues. She is dealing with laundry now. The fabric is heavier when wet. She lifts it, wrings it, and carries it toward a place where it can dry. There is no single machine performing the sequence. There are hands. There is water. There is soap. there is sunlight, there is patience. Laundry can occupy a substantial part of domestic labor, particularly in households with several people. Clothing itself is valuable enough that it must be cared for. A torn sleeve may be repaired. A worn garment may be altered. A child's clothing may eventually be passed to a younger child. A family with limited means cannot simply replace everything whenever it becomes inconvenient. The result is a different relationship with possessions. Things are expected to last. And when they stop being useful in one form, people often find another. An old cloth becomes a cleaning rag. A damaged piece of wood becomes fuel. A container is reused. Nothing about this is romantic. It is practical. The cost of waste is simply more visible. Outside, the children have begun drifting toward one another. Their games are improvised around the village itself. There may be a stick, a rope, a ball, a patch of open ground, an animal to watch. The road itself becomes part of their world. But adults remain nearby. A 19th century village is not an environment in which children are completely detached from adult life. They see work constantly. They understand what animals require. They hear conversations about weather and harvests. They watch people make things. They learn which roads are safe, which neighbors are strict, which houses have food, which workshops are interesting, which adults can be trusted. Education exists, and schooling is increasingly important during the 19th century, but attendance and quality vary enormously depending on place, family circumstances, and local institutions. For some children, the schoolhouse is part of the regular rhythm. For others, especially where family labor is necessary, education competes with practical responsibilities. A child may know how to handle a farm tool before knowing how to write a long letter. That does not mean the child is uneducated in every meaningful sense. Knowledge simply arrives through different doors. The village itself is a classroom. The afternoon will bring another lesson. For now, the road continues to move. A horse pulls a cart toward the market. The wheels knock against stones. The driver slows at a bend. Behind him, another cart follows. Travel is not fast, but it is constant enough to keep the village connected. A road is more than a path through the landscape. It is a channel through which information, goods, people, and ideas enter. A stranger arriving in the village may bring news from a town. A merchant may carry goods that could not be produced locally. A letter may arrive through the postal system. A traveler may mention a new railway line, a new price for grain, or an event happening far away. The outside world enters slowly, but it enters. And by the 1880s, Europe is changing quickly enough that even remote communities cannot remain entirely untouched. Factories are expanding. Cities are growing. New technologies are appearing. People are beginning to travel farther. Yet the old patterns remain powerful, because changing technology does not instantly change habit. A man still needs to feed a horse. A field still needs tending. A loaf still needs baking. A roof still needs repairing. A child still needs waking. The 19th century is therefore not a clean dividing line between old life and modern life. It is a period of overlap. The old world and the new world exist beside one another. A railway may carry passengers faster than any horse, but a farmer may still walk behind a plough. A telegraph may send a message across great distances, but a neighbour may still walk down the lane to speak to another neighbour. A factory may produce thousands of objects, but a village carpenter may still repair one chair at a time. This mixture is what makes the period so interesting. The future has arrived. It simply has not arrived everywhere at once. Near noon, the intensity of work begins to change. The sun is higher. The air has warmed. Pierre pauses at the edge of the field. His hands are dirty. His boots are covered in soil. He looks toward the village and can see smoke rising from the chimneys. Somewhere, food is being prepared. The smell does not reach him clearly, but he knows what it means. The midday meal is approaching. For a moment, the work stops. Tools are set down. Animals are given a little rest. People begin turning toward home, toward a shaded wall, toward a workshop corner, or toward whatever place offers a few minutes away from the sun. The village has been moving since before sunrise. Now it takes a breath, and with that pause comes another part of 19th century life that modern people rarely notice. The working day is not divided into neat blocks by digital schedules. There are no glowing reminders, no messages arriving every few minutes, no constant stream of notifications demanding attention. Time is still passing, of course, but its pressure feels different. The position of the sun matters, the meal matters, the animals matter. The work itself tells people when one part of the day has ended and another has begun. Pierre picks up his tool and starts walking back. The road feels warmer beneath his boots. Children are gathering near the houses. A cart is returning from the fields. The blacksmith's hammer has finally stopped. For the first time since dawn, the village becomes quieter again. Not silent, never silent, but quieter. The morning's labor has been completed. The afternoon is waiting, and soon around simple tables and warm kitchens, the people of the village will pause long enough to eat, talk, listen, and remember that even in a life built around work, there must still be moments when the hands are allowed to rest. By the time the afternoon begins, the village has settled into a different rhythm. The hardest urgency of the morning has softened. Tools rest against walls. Horses stand quietly in shaded places. The lanes are warmer now, and the smell of cooking drifts from open doors. For a short while, the village seems less concerned with production and more concerned with people. Inside Jean's house, the family has gathered again. The meal is modest. There is bread, something warm from the kitchen, perhaps vegetables or soup depending on the season, and whatever dairy or preserved food the household can afford. There is no abundance for its own sake. Food has a purpose here, and meals are built around what exists. Pierre eats slowly. The children are less quiet now. The youngest has recovered from the morning sleepiness and is beginning to ask questions. Where is the cart going? Why is the horse tired? Who is making that sound outside? Children have always asked questions. The difference is that in this world, many answers are immediately visible. The child does not need to watch a video explaining how bread is made. The bakery is down the road. The child can smell it. The child can watch the baker work. The child can see the oven. The same is true of animals, farming, carpentry, and countless other things. The world is physically close. After the meal, Pierre remains seated for a little longer. His body has been working since morning. There is no shame in resting. In fact, rest is part of the rhythm of labor. Outside, neighbors speak in small groups. Someone has news from the nearby town. Someone else knows that the road has become difficult after the recent rain. A woman mentions the price of grain. Another asks about a relative who has been ill. The conversation moves without a plan. This is how much of village communication works. Not through announcements, not through newspapers alone, not through an endless stream of written messages, through people. A person walks somewhere and carries information with them. A person returns from the market and tells someone what they saw. A traveler arrives with news. A letter is read aloud. A rumor begins. A fact becomes a story. And sometimes a story becomes something larger than the truth. The village has no internet, but it has something that serves a strangely familiar purpose. Everyone knows something, and everyone wants to know something else. Gossip is not merely entertainment. It is one of the ways a small community keeps track of itself. Who is married? Who has died? Who is expecting a child? Who has moved away? Who has found work? Who has fallen into debt? Who has received a letter? Who is behaving strangely? Who has a daughter old enough to marry? Who has bought a new horse? These things matter because people live close together and their futures overlap. The village is a network of relationships. Some are warm, some are practical, some are tense, some are unequal. A wealthy landowner and a poor laborer may live within sight of one another while experiencing completely different versions of the same village. This is one reason the peaceful appearance of the landscape should not be confused with universal comfort. The countryside can be beautiful while life remains difficult. A stone house may look picturesque from the road and still be cold in winter. A field may glow beautifully in afternoon light and still fail to produce enough food. A family may laugh together and still worry about money. A child may play beside a church wall while an adult nearby is quietly thinking about an unpaid debt. The past was not a simpler world because it was less technologically advanced. It was simply a world in which many difficulties were different, and some were harder. Inside another house, an elderly woman sits near the window. She has lived long enough to remember a village that looked different. She remembers people who are no longer alive. She remembers houses before certain repairs were made. She remembers winters that younger people know only through stories. Her knowledge is not written in an archive. It exists in memory. When she tells a child that a particular family once lived in another house, the information travels through her voice. This is how ordinary history survives. Not always through official records. Sometimes through a sentence spoken at a kitchen table. The child may forget most of what was said, but perhaps one detail will remain. A name, a place, a story. Years later, that child may tell it again. In this way, memory moves forward. The afternoon light has become softer. Near the church, a few people pass through the square. The church is one of the most important communal spaces in the village, though its exact role varies with region, denomination, and local custom. For many families, religious life is woven into the calendar. Sundays, feast days, funerals, weddings, baptisms, seasonal traditions. The bells that mark the hours also remind people of a larger rhythm beyond work. The churchyard holds another kind of memory. Names, dates, families, generations. Some graves belong to people whose faces nobody alive remembers clearly, yet their names remain. A child walking past may not think about mortality. An older person might. The village contains the entire cycle of life within a relatively small space. Birth, childhood, courtship, marriage, work, illness, old age. Death, nothing is completely hidden. This can create a stronger awareness of time than modern people sometimes experience. Life is visible. Generations overlap. Children grow into adults while elderly neighbors gradually disappear. The village changes, but slowly enough for people to notice. Near the churchyard, two young people meet. They do not make a great scene of it. They exchange a few words. Perhaps they've been seeing each other for some time. Courtship in a rural 19th century community can be shaped by family expectations, economic realities, religion, geography, and social reputation. Marriage is not simply a private romantic decision. For many people, it has practical consequences. Where will the couple live? Who owns land? What work can they do? Can they support children? What will the families think? Affection matters. So does survival. This does not mean people lacked romance. Quite the opposite. It means romance existed within a larger structure of life. A glance across a lane could matter. A letter could matter enormously. A visit could require planning. When communication is slower, small gestures can carry more weight. A written letter, especially for someone separated from a loved one, is not simply another notification. It is an object. Someone has written it by hand. Someone has folded it. Someone has carried it. Someone has waited for it. And someone may read it more than once. The afternoon continues. A boy runs down the lane after a group of older children. They have found a patch of open ground. Their game is not carefully organized. It does not need to be. The village provides everything required. A wall becomes a boundary. A stick becomes a tool. A stone becomes a marker. A passing cart becomes an interruption. The children know the village physically. They know where the road bends, where the mud is deepest, where the stream runs, where the adults can see them, where they are less likely to be disturbed. Their map of the world is small, but within it there are countless details. This is another feature of older village life that modern people may not immediately recognize. People often knew their immediate surroundings intensely. A particular tree, a particular field, a particular bend in the road, a particular sound from a particular house. A person might know a landscape not from a map, but from memory built over years of walking through it. The elderly woman near the window knows this landscape differently. She remembers it before the child was born, perhaps before the child's parents were born. She knows where the old path used to run, which field once belonged to another family, which house burned and was rebuilt. History is not far away, it is beneath the feet. At the edge of the village, a small group of workers has gathered. Their conversation is practical. There is talk of work, weather, wages, and the coming days. Some may own land. Others may work for someone else. The difference matters. Economic life in rural Europe is not uniform. Some families are relatively secure. Others survive through a combination of small plots, seasonal work, craft, animal keeping, and occasional wages. A poor harvest can change everything. So can illness. So can an accident. A broken tool is inconvenient. A serious injury can be devastating. There is no modern safety net comparable to what many people in industrialized societies later came to expect. Family and community often become essential. Neighbors may help. Relatives may help. Religious institutions may help. Charitable organizations may help. But help is never guaranteed. The result is a life in which uncertainty is always present, even during peaceful afternoons. And still, people laugh. A man tells a joke. Someone smiles. A child falls into the grass and gets back up. A woman complains about the weather. Two neighbors disagree about something so ordinary that neither will remember it next week. Life continues. Perhaps this is the most important thing to understand about ordinary people in the past. They did not spend every moment thinking about hardship. They experienced happiness. They became bored. They became annoyed. They fell in love. They laughed at foolish things. They worried about tomorrow and then became distracted by something happening today. Human beings remain remarkably recognizable across centuries. The surroundings change. The tools change. The expectations change. But the basic rhythms of human emotion remain. Late in the afternoon, Jean sends one of the children on a small errand. The child takes a basket and walks toward a neighboring house. The distance is short. The task is simple. But even a small errand teaches the child something about the community. Who lives where? Which door belongs to which family? Who is older? Who has children? Who keeps animals? Which road to take? The child returns with the basket. No one celebrates the achievement. There is no reward notification. The child has simply done what was asked, and tomorrow there will be another task. Perhaps that sounds repetitive. It is. But repetition is not necessarily emptiness. Routine gives life structure. People know what comes next. The same door opens. The same path is walked. The same kettle is placed near the fire. The same animals are fed. The same bell sounds. Within that repetition, small changes become noticeable. A new baby, a repaired roof, a different horse, a new shopkeeper, a stranger in the village, a letter from someone who left. These are the events that make an ordinary life feel different from one day to another. The sun begins to lower. The shadows of the houses stretch across the road. The children are called home. A horse is led toward the stable. Tools begin to disappear from the fields. The blacksmith's workshop grows quieter. The village is not finished working, but the energy has changed. Morning was about beginning. Afternoon has been about continuing. Now the day is beginning to turn inward. Jean looks toward the sky. She knows there is still work to do before darkness. There will be food to prepare, animals to settle, clothes to put away, the fire to tend, the house to make ready for evening. And there is something else the approaching sunset will soon reveal. During the day, the village belongs to everyone. Roads are visible. Fields are open. People move freely between houses and workshops. But when the sun disappears, the world becomes smaller. Light becomes precious. Darkness becomes physical. And for people living here, night is not simply the end of the day. It changes what is possible. It changes how far a person can see, how far they can safely travel, how long they remain outside, how the family gathers, how the house feels. Even the meaning of a single candle changes. When there is nothing else to illuminate the room, the sun is now touching the distant fields. The village has entered the final part of the afternoon. Smoke rises more clearly against the golden sky. The road begins to empty. One by one, people turn toward home. And somewhere beyond the last houses, the first evening shadows are already waiting.